Welcome back to the Baltimore Whitman Expo. We are here live with another special guest. This time joining us from the ancient side, our one and only friend, Mr. Aaron Berk. Aaron, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So you've kind of dabbled into this world that Mike and I are in now with my buddy Mike over there. You have your podcast going. Tell me about it.
I put my toe in.
Yeah, you dipped or you jumped in head first, I think.
Yeah, I think he did.
I think I fell.
Well, that's about, that's okay.
I kind of took a long slide, and into the pool I went.
Well, now you're swimming though. So
yeah,
how is
now
it?
I'm swimming. Yeah, it's been really, really great. I think when Mike came on board at our company, Harlan Berk, I knew he did a podcast with you for many, many, many years. And so I said, we should do something like that because I had thought about writing a book on ancient coins. That's what I was always told to do. And I decided, my dad already kind of does that. And I wanted something a little bit more dynamic that could change with the times.
That's
and
exactly
so,
right.
More modern audience?
Yeah, and modern audience. And also, everything is moving constantly, and I could talk about the news, I could talk about current auctions, and really fill a void that wasn't really available for ancient coins at all.
Yeah.
And so, and because I think there's a big gap of knowledge base that a lot of collectors have a difficult time navigating, they needed a show like ours to kind of help them get started.
Right.
And it's a show that's not only good for advanced collectors, but for beginners.
Yeah, and I mean that's from what I've seen of the show. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's content there for everybody, from somebody that just wants to learn about ancients who knows nothing, to the guys that are out there spending six figures on ancient coins. I mean, there's literally something for everybody. So
And
I like it.
It was really kind of funny because Aaron talks about when I came out at Berk. It's like I think after a month and a half I went to him and I'm like, Aaron, it's like, we don't have to do like a podcast. No. I hired you to work at the shop. It's like, okay, I'm just checking, And it was something that we always had in the back of our mind and we always wanted to do. And
Yeah, it was about a year in.
Yeah.
After you started, that we had to kind of flush it out, decide what our format was going to be, and then through trial and error, kind of come up with the right formula.
It's the hard part.
And it's been. And we're constantly playing with it all the time, but we've kind of got a nice niche now.
Yeah.
And what I've always tried to sell, and I'm sure you guys do this with your podcast, is that I always say, this isn't our show, this is the
Your
listener's
show. Yeah.
This is your show.
Yes.
And so, because I don't pretend to know every last detail about ancient coins, but there's a lot of collectors that are very much in-depth research into their one area.
Yes.
And they know it better than anyone else.
Yep.
And so I might tiptoe into like their area and decide, well, you missed this, or you could have added this, or you totally messed up and you should have done this.
I was just going to ask you, how often do you get corrected by people through email?
I get corrected
or
all
on the
no,
show?
no, we tell them do it right in the comments.
Yeah.
Because again, this is not our show, this is the community show.
Right.
And so I always just say be positive, because I don't pretend to be perfect, and this is why we're all here to help each other and to learn from each other.
yeah, don't be a jerk, but put it in the comments because then it'll pair up with the actual, misinformation or whatever it is that happens.
Misinformation,
Well,
I don't
it's
think
just
is
a term. You know
the
what I
right
mean? It's
term,
like
but
the incorrect fact or whatever it is. We're able
Yeah.
to fix that,
Right.
and it stays attached to where the comment is.
Right. And the other thing that was really important to me is to never take. We have one advertiser, and it's Bellinger,
Ballinger Vineyards.
and they send us bottles of wine as payment.
Oh my!
They're the
so-
official wine of the Ancient Coin Podcast.
Right, and so
with Aaron Berk.
I never wanted to be a pay-for-play type of scenario,
Yep.
because then I can't talk freely. And we talk about upcoming auctions, and I basically am promoting all of my competitors all the time. And a lot of people said, why don't you charge them for doing that? Because you're drawing interest to their auctions. And I said, well, then I'm a pay-for-play,
Yeah.
and I don't want to do that.
Yep.
And so
That's exactly what we did.
yeah, and I've had a lot of. I've even had an owner of one of the auction houses come here and actually came up and thanked me for promoting one of his auctions.
I mean,
And so,
some people don't understand that doing stuff like this is actually just for the good of the hobby. It's not a self-service thing. I have definitely over the years gotten some interesting things happen from this. But I guarantee you that I put a lot more into it than I've ever feel like has come back at me. But that's fine. That's why we do it, because
that's the whole point.
That's the plan, is to
Yeah, and I've always been you have to give to get
exactly
type of scenario, and I believe in karma very
Yes.
much, and balance in the world.
Yep.
And so, we all have our niche, and we also have our experience, and we want to share it with others. And this is a great platform for us to be able to do that. And it's been really great. I mean, going to shows and having all the people come up and say, I'm a big fan.
Well, it helps that you got old Salty Pants down there to kind of show you the ropes, right?
Yeah, no, he's been great. He's been great.
Not a chance. Not a chance. I'm no good.
And so, and we have really good chemistry between the two of us too, which is good. That helps. I mean, at the beginning, people were like, why is Mike on there? He doesn't know anything.
That's kind
That
of
was the point.
That was when we
that was the
started our
point.
show. We had an advanced collector, which was Mike,
Right.
a beginning collector, which was the name we will not say, and me. I was a dealer. And that was the three of us. And that's
That was
why
the dynamic.
That was the dynamic we started with. It didn't quite work so well, but we then kind of switched it up to a little bit different
Collector
dynamic.
versus dealer.
Yeah. And then
And
now all of a
it's
sudden,
actually
look at
dealer and dealer, but still as collectors.
him. Yeah.
Because we still collect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the best part about all of this is the youth that are online and have, if you asked me back in 2018 before COVID, the longevity of the numismatic world, I would have said we're in
big trouble.
we're in big
Sharp
trouble
decline.
because we were looking at I was a big member of a big participant in Roundtable at the time,
Yep.
and we were talking to you, Matt, and we were talking about the A&As and the shows in general and the decline and the average age of the collector. Excuse me. And then after COVID, everything exploded because a lot of kids got online and started dealing online and collecting online and doing stuff like that. And so the podcast has been great for that because I've got all kinds of kids now that are following, and teens and young adults that are following the podcast and making this not only their hobby, but some of them have become dealers.
Isn't that fun?
And
Isn't
the,
that fun?
and
That's
the
my
amazing
favorite.
thing, and it started with our podcast, right? Where we started getting listens from all kinds of weird places, right?
I look at
we were number one in Turkmenistan for a while.
We're apparently huge in Latvia.
Yes,
like-
people like us in Latvia. They probably don't understand a word we're saying. But
Maybe they just like your Mike Chocolate voice, the dark chocolate Mike
don't know.
voice.
Don't know. Fantastic.
We did have a girl at the beginning of ours who said that she liked to listen to our podcast to mellow out, just to hear our voices.
Well,
But
you
I
know,
thought it was neat because Aaron was in Europe earlier this year.
Yeah, it was in Portugal.
In Portugal, and the guy's like, "You're the guy with the podcast."
Oh my God, isn't that funny?
Yeah,
Well-
you open the door and he's like, "I know you, and I watch your videos." And then we ended up having a great conversation.
Isn't that
after It was
funny?
really, really
Well,
nice.
let's switch gears a little bit into what your actual bread and butter is, which is ancient coins.
Yeah.
How is that market at this point? Like, how's ancients doing?
The market's been extremely positive for a long time. Unlike, I think, people in the U.S. business, people in our company have called it a doomsday for a while.
Wow.
And but in ancient coins, it's just been stellar since probably 2008.
I was gonna
It really
say.
has not declined at all.
I mean, there's been several national news stories over the last few years about coins that you've been either involved in or wanted to be involved in, or like sold for record numbers just in the last few years.
Yes, and then he has my nickname tag on him. He's America's underbidder.
It's true.
I mean,
true.
but it is what it is. But that's really an interesting thing for that industry, or for that little part of the hobby, because seeing record prices being brought for things recently says that's a strong, healthy market.
Yeah, I mean, it's back in the day, there was only one time that an ancient coin had sold for $1 million. And it really, within the last 10 years, we've had now a number of coins gone over $1 million.
That's crazy.
And now the most expensive ancient coin ever to sell, which I was the underbidder on, but of course didn't get, was one that brought $6 million. And
But it was a good thing you were the underbidder.
yeah, it was a good thing I was the underbidder.
Yes.
Because then it wouldn't have made $6 million for sure.
No, that's not what I was saying.
Oh,
it's
because
it ended up getting confiscated. And
No. That was the Pat Capayan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was the underbidder on the. There was a gold-eyed Mar, which we've talked about, that got confiscated.
Which is a ridiculous story in the first
It
place.
is a ridiculous
Yes.
story. I was the underbidder on the coin. It brought 4.2 million, which broke the record of a coin in 2012 that brought 3.2 million that the Sheikh of Qatar bought at the time and paid way too much money for it. And everybody said it was a ridiculous price.
Well, but
He
he's
di-
the Sheikh of Qatar. What does
Yes.
he care?
He died. And
He
then,
has his own money.
Yeah.
He died, and then his collection was being sold by NAC over a number of years. And his problem coins, which this was one of them, was going to be at the end because they figured that they would soften the family up to take a loss at the end.
Oh boy.
Well, in the meantime, the Eidmar broke it at 4.2 million, and then it got confiscated, so it was a tainted coin holding our record for the most expensive ancient coin. Then the Pantocrapaean came back up, and it brought 6 million. So I was the underbidder on both coins, breaking the record twice. And so now the record holder that was previously the record holder is now the record holder again.
And so he was bidding
And I have
on
nothing to show for it
Yeah,
but a good story.
but a good story. That's
he was
funny.
bidding on that first Eidmar the day he interviewed me.
That's right.
Wow.
That's kind of my connection to
Wow,
it.
that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's there's a lot of ultra wealthy that are in the market that are driving the upper 2 or 3%, which is true in almost all areas of collecting.
Exactly.
And I would say that the low end of the market is probably stayed about the same, which is pretty typical.
Yeah.
I would say the middle is kind of just up and down, and then there's two markets at play in ancients because we now have slabs.
Yes.
And so it's really completely two different markets, independent of each other, but both driving each other at the same time in certain levels.
It's funny that the slabs are geared towards the people that are not specialists, that are not necessarily ancient coin first kind of guys, and then the real true ancient guys are like, get it out of that darn thing. I don't want it in
Well,
there.
that's the whole point. Is
So-
you can handle them. It's not going to hurt them. It's not going to do anything
Well,
to them.
yeah. I mean, how many years did they lay in the
Right,
ground
they were in the
before they were
ground.
dug
There was-
up and
there
cleaned?
were
That's
You
why
know?
people
corroded
say,
and-
why are you holding them? And I'm like, did you see these things when they came out of the ground?
Yeah.
They had to clean them chemically or mechanically
Yeah.
just to even get it back down to the
After
original
they
surfaces.
shoveled them out of the earth.
Right.
This isn't like mirror finishes where you're going to leave a thumbprint on it. It's
Yeah.
going to be very difficult. On some gold, you probably could, but in general, it's not the case. The only ancient coins you really have to worry about is bronze coins because it can get green disease from moisture. But beyond that, silver and gold, you don't really have to
Yeah.
worry too much about.
Yeah.
What I found, and this is what's been so great about the podcast, is that one, I have to prepare for it every time we do one. So it means I have to come up with an educational section, so it sharpens my
It keeps you on point.
yeah, to kind of relearn some things or to kind of figure out some things that I wasn't very strong on in the past. And also, because I represent so many people in auction, I'm constantly watching the market and I'm watching the trends.
Yep.
And I'm seeing what's happening from month to month by representing the clients because I have to come up with numbers for them to bid to figure out if we're going to be successful or not within the realm of what the market is dictating at that very moment.
Yeah.
And
And that could
so-
change within weeks or days or months.
Exactly.
All the time.
So that's been really wonderful. What I've noticed with slabs is that if you look at like a company that only auctions off ancient slabs, I won't name their name. There's a few
Are
of
they
them.
in Texas? Are the big
Yeah,
one?
they might be.
And a couple other places.
But they tend to only, for their premier sales, only are able to sell gold and silver coins that they can get into high designated slabs. Because most bronze coins are clean mechanically, they're going to have some evidence of smoothing. That's almost always the case on probably 90% of the bronze coins. And so they're going to be downgraded on the slab in the way that they are being graded by NGC.
Sure.
And they're not going to bring as much because the people that are paying huge money and multiples of what the coin are worth are coins that get stars or 5 out of 5, 5 out of 5 surface and strikes.
Sure.
And so what happens is then they're eliminating a huge portion of the market that typically is being sold by the ancient dealers, which is good for us and it's bad for them.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is, I feel like the ancient coins where the people are only after the highest graded 5 out of 5, that just comes
They're
straight
investing.
from modern U.S. coinage and,
Yes.
and that whole racket that, I mean,
and oddly, they
marketing
probably
technique.
have a way better upside than the modern people do.
I would think you're probably right.
It's more of a wild, wild west still, I think. And the other thing is that NGC doesn't guarantee the authenticity, which they
Yeah.
do in all other areas.
How do you combat that, though, where you get somebody that you have two equal coins, one of which is in an NGC holder and the other which is raw in your hand. How do you combat the fact that NGC? I mean, obviously you have the guarantee, of course, but is it just a personal preference? And
Well, I think most people who are in the ancient field would say it's a personal preference. I talk to collectors here who say, I want them in plastic because it just gives me peace of mind. I understand that. That's more of a U.S. philosophy
Right.
than it is anything else.
because the Euros hate this. Hate
No,
slabs.
they do not. They're not big fans.
Yeah.
But you will find a star slab coin in the European auctions because they know people are going to pay a
Right.
ridiculous price for it. And that's the other thing, too, is that the star is really a personal preference of two guys at NGC. It's not a consensus like we're taking around to
Right.
4 or 5 dealers and getting their consensus. Do you think this is a great coin? Do
Yeah.
you think this is a great coin? So if they put a star on the coin and somebody pays 10 times what the coin is worth, that's not necessarily a broad view of the market. That's
Right.
just that one little niche in the market.
And
Yeah.
just to comment on, so, you had mentioned in your question, well, they still have the guarantee. They don't have a guarantee
They don't have a guarantee.
because NGC doesn't guarantee ancients.
Yeah, they guarantee the grade, which I'm not sure how you can guarantee
Yeah,
grade.
you guarantee
But,
grade, but they're not going to
because
guarantee
grade
authenticity.
Grade is, see, the other thing, too, is what people don't understand with ancient coins is that the grade is probably one of the last things we all look at because we all have, it's not like the U.S. market where everything is bought and sold, can be bought and sold on gray sheets. There's no gray sheets for ancient
There's a lot of
coins.
dynamics. You have strike, you have centering, you have style,
metal quality, the
yeah.
art history of the die cutter
Yep.
Right.
is
The style.
huge, is probably the biggest part of it. And then supply and demand and rarity. You'll have specific coins that are extremely rare that always come corroded. And so it's never going to get a high designation, which means that it'll never sell well in an NGC slab to one of those buyers because
Right.
they just don't understand the field.
And
But
then
that
the
doesn't
other-
mean that it's not a worthwhile
And
coin.
then
No,
the wild card in the whole thing is, well, what if all of a sudden they dig up 4,000 of these? Like that
Well, that's
happens.
always the case.
And that can happen.
That's always the case.
Yep.
Like that happened with the Athens Owls. Like they dug up a big giant pile of them, and
They did.
the market
They did.
changed.
I like the way that you've classified that for me. It's the Morgan dollar of the ancient world.
It
the
is.
Morgan dollar
I mean,
of
it
each
really
world.
is. But
It was.
But-
Yeah, we now think that they were minted as far as Israel in Judea at the time because
Wow.
they actually have some that have Jewish symbols on the cheeks.
I did not know that.
And
But
so
that's awesome.
if you had a lot of silver in the ancient world, you would produce the Athens tetragram because that was recognized as money all over the
Sure.
world. And that's why you'll get a lot of Athens coins that have test cuts on them because it was really moving from territory to territory, which is also another reason why it's hard to fathom or to believe that one country owns all of these things,
Right.
source country wise.
Right.
When they
Exactly.
were literally moving from country to country and all over the
And made
place.
in country to
Right.
country.
Made in country to
yeah.
country.
I mean, if you want to be technical, yeah, it was the Roman Empire, but that's not.
Well,
really,
let them come back and get them then.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and then is it the same people that are living there today that lived there 2,000 years ago?
Also, a
The
good
Romans
point.
and the Italians.
Right.
A little different.
So
Also, a very good point. So,
I mean, you have this argument of I don't want to get into the Middle East too much, but you talk about Israel and the one group says, well, they got this in the 40s. Well, no, they were run out in the ancient world.
right.
So there's evidence from the coins that the Jews were there, and there's evidence that the Arabs were there. There's a lot of people were moving in and out of lands thousands of years ago that people don't understand.
And it really depends on who's
Today.
writing the story as far as what you get from it.
It's true.
Like if you think about
very true.
the Persians and the Macedonians and all the territories
Everybody-
that they conquered
Yeah,
that
I mean-
today are nothing like that.
Like
No.
the Ptolemies ran Egypt for
Right.
300 years. That was Ptolemy the First was a Macedonian general of Alexander the Great. He was
So,
not
yeah.
Egyptian.
Yeah, no, he was
Greek.
probably a white guy, right?
Yeah, he
like
was
he was a pretty white guy, or
Greek.
maybe an olive-colored guy.
So,
but definitely not Egyptian.
No, it's not Egyptian. It's not Egyptian. I mean, the Egyptians really didn't even have currency until the Ptolemies came to Egypt.
We had a fun discussion about that in my office the other day about how ancient Egypt is a whole different can of worms compared to the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks because
Yes.
they were literally building pyramids 4,000 or 5,000 years ago.
Completely different civilization.
A completely different civilization, but at one point they come together and they kind of intertwine and
we talk about this all the time that we're closer in date period to Cleopatra than she was to the pyramids.
yeah, isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
And then also because the ancients loved the Egyptian culture even back then so much, they incorporated it into their coinage. So a lot of the Roman Egyptian, like you said, or the Greeks, they incorporated the Egyptian gods into their iconography. That's how much they appreciated or at least honored the Egyptians.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
fascinating.
It's
The whole
really
the whole
fascinating.
thing is fascinating. And as a history nerd myself, we had probably a 2-hour discussion the other day in my office when we were just slow about history and why things are the way they are in certain places. And it was fun. We had a good time.
Yeah, and coins tell a story. I mean,
That's
they
right.
were the propaganda of their day.
That's been the story of our show here. Is
Yes.
everybody that is come on has when they talk about what they do and why they do it. Almost everybody has mentioned storytelling, history. Those are like the three things
Yeah.
that have been common themes throughout almost every interview we've done. So,
Yeah, I
love
mean,
it.
in ancients, if you want to get the word out, you did it through your coinage.
That's right.
I conquered this person. These are my lands.
Because they surely didn't have the internet and or TV
No,
back
they did
then.
not.
No
They
News
did
7
not.
to tell you that old Nero was burning down the empire.
Yeah, he was fiddling.
Yeah, he was fiddling away.
Fiddling.
But
And just, like, if you think about, like, I think about, like, the fact that, like, I went to Egypt when I was 18, and I went to the Valley of the Kings, and you saw Tutankhamun's tomb, which is a closet,
yes,
in comparison to the rest of it. Ramses' tomb is, like, massive. And you realize the only reason Tutankhamun is famous is because his tomb was intact.
Yep.
That's
Right,
it.
because they
there
found
was,
it.
there was
They
a
found
flood that plugged up the opening into his tomb, and then they kind of forgot about it, and there it was.
And so I like to call him the Gerald Ford of pharaohs because that's the only reason he's famous. And I got in trouble with
Did
from
you?
a listener when
Okay.
I mentioned that on the podcast.
Well, how are
he
we
said,
not
I knew
gonna get in
Gerald
trouble
Ford.
with
He was a
our-
hell of a man. So, all the gold that must have been in Ramses and all
I
these
know.
other, all that was probably turned into Greek and Roman coins at one point.
Isn't that nuts to think
You
about?
know,
That's
Because where did that gold go? Well, of course, it went to the Greeks and it went to the Romans.
had to go somewhere.
So it was
didn't-
around.
Didn't just evaporate into thin air.
The Colosseum was literally built on the backs of the Jews because when Titus went in to quell the Jewish rebellion under Vespasian, he sacked the temple, the Jewish temple, took all the gold and silver out, brought it back to Rome, and then they built the
Built the
Colosseum.
Colosseum. Wow, that's how. See, that's why history is awesome.
So like, you could even argue like, well, are every Roman Aurei, is it really Roman, or is it could be tested and figure out that it came from Egypt?
It's Egyptian.
or from Israel. Who the hell knows? It was plunder time.
Plunder time. That's
so-
it. Seems to be another
But you
thing
see
that
all
happens
these
in
connections,
history.
and that's what's really wonderful. And then you put it into perspective, and then there's new finds and new things all the time. And then you get into the legality thing. That's the biggest problem we have right now with
Yeah.
ancient coins and antiquities is the legality issues. And I always have to push people to let them know that it is not illegal to own ancient coins or
I
artifacts.
just wish they could streamline it a little better, and or get these countries to understand that yes, this might have been minted technically under the name of your country thousands of years ago, but it was actually made over here in Romania, which has nothing to do with you.
Well, I consider it a commodity in the ground, it not only for historical value, but for actual value. And so I think a lot of the source countries, if they would legalize and tax the hell out of the stuff coming out of the ground,
Right.
they would make a ton of money. They would kill the black market, because I can tell you right now, it's a double-edged sword, because there's no laws saying you can't own ancient material. It's basically what you can bring in and out of the country.
Right,
It's a
exactly.
passport.
Yeah.
Right.
Is essentially what it is.
What is allowed to go from country to country legally?
But
Anything
the
that's-
ownership isn't the problem. It's literally moving it across the border.
Right. And so what's happened is because the internet created this great transparency, right? We're in a great transparency mode for numismatics, where everybody can see what everybody else paid, and we can see the history of where this piece has been, and so on and so forth. Well, guess what? The smugglers see the same thing.
Right.
And so the pre-1970 date, which means that museums and institutions can own, that if you have a pre-1970 pedigree, it can mean 2, 3, 10 times what the coin is worth. Just like if you get a star on a slab.
Right.
But,
It's like a hall pass.
it's the major hall pass, right? And so what happens is then the upper part of the market, which we talked about earlier in this segment, is going through the roof and getting record prices, and the smugglers and the black market see that, and they just dig more.
Yeah.
and then they just find somebody else to buy it. And if it's
Right.
not Westerners because there's a rule or a regulation against it, then they'll find somebody in the Middle East to buy it. There's always going to be some criminal enterprise somewhere.
And then it'll filter from there to someplace else.
Where else?
or-
And then uncertainty in certain major archaeological areas, like Syria, for example, had a bunch, had
course.
several massive ancient myths.
Well, you have broken countries, and when you
Right.
can't control a broken country,
Right.
that stuff
and
just
so,
pours out.
You know, and not true in all sorts of countries, but there has been documented information about some museum people or people in the government that have been part of the looting in certain poor countries.
Again,
you know,
not
it's
surprising.
It's going to happen when you have poor countries and you have, you know, governments that, frankly, I mean, you could do that in the States too. People are bought all the time, bought and
Right.
sold, but it's much easier in the poorer countries. And so, in my view, and the other thing is most coins, gold and silver, are not found on sites. They're found on trade routes. So when you dig them up, they're not digging up a archaeological site.
Yeah.
It's
Trail.
literally on a trail.
Yeah.
And so, but not to say that you can't find those things on archaeological sites, but you'd have a much better chance of having, if it was legalized, having legitimate people doing metal detectoring and not slime balls. and then they could tax it, make money to do more digs, and to finance, and
And to-
literally take the commodity that's in the earth.
And the other thing is,
and make money
it
off
seems like a lot of the times they go after the stuff that's just so absolutely common that it doesn't matter. Like,
and they jack the prices up.
yeah, it's very strange. It's a very strange industry. It's a very strange market that I don't necessarily understand completely, but I think I have a decent working knowledge of.
Unfortunately, we're dealers and collectors, and so we don't really care when we're not a care to the governments. They have bigger fish to fry.
Right.
You know, having a military base somewhere is much more important than whether a collector can buy a coin or not.
Exactly.
So we're always going to be fighting this kind of lost cause until, frankly, the countries kind of, you know, take their heads out of their rear ends and figure out a better way than what they're trying to do now.
Yeah, I agree.
So changing gears for a second.
go ahead.
Harlan Berk has been around for quite some time. So since 1964. Harlan still comes to work every single day. There's a little insight from the
Yeah, he's here.
from the backside. The man comes to work every single day. But I know that he's kind of winding down, and you're kind of taking over the business. What kind of changes do you see coming at Harlan Berk, or at least
Dang.
what types of things have you kind of moved towards?
You let your
in
employees
own?
ask you this stuff?
I think what is really great about running a company is I've always been the type that I'm open to all ideas from my employees, and I like having synergy with my employees to come up with the best possible avenues for growing the business.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah. Everybody takes
and so
ownership.
I never count anybody out. I also know that whether you are wrapping coins at Harlan Berk, taking garbage out of Harlan Berk, or selling $1 million coins at Harlan Berk, it's all part of the cog, and everybody's important. And I've done all those jobs, and so I understand that. I think from my perspective, I've always wanted to bring technology into Harlan Berk, and so me pushing the envelope and doing more videos of coins, and doing the podcast and being fully involved in social media. I think eventually getting into virtual reality would be really, really cool. for the
Whoa,
coin
that'd be
business.
fun, yeah.
I would love
You could
that.
fly around the surfaces of a coin and
literally you'll be able to have virtual coin shows in a sense.
That's cool.
Which would be really, really cool. I think there's a lot of avenues we can take that can really grow the business. But it all starts from old traditional things that my dad has always put on me, which is like customer service, extremely important to me, and also making sure that we're doing things honestly, and that we're always telling the truth and doing the right thing by not only for our employees but also for the clients that make us who we are.
that's the most important
So it's
part.
really not change. It's really just a different way of doing a lot more
No,
of the
I
same
think
things.
I think there's certain things obviously building certain AI systems into our website to be able to help facilitate the collector and the dealer getting together to be able to go and bid in auctions or finding coins and things like that.
Right.
I think AI would be something. It's big on my mind to build out some of that stuff eventually. But that's part of the whole technology thing. When I started at Harlan Burke, we were still doing analog catalogs and cutting out photos.
Oh my gosh.
And
All the buyer bid sales
yeah,
were a real
and
wreck.
so, and now I can lay out a catalog in InDesign in like 2.5 days.
Wow.
And I just laid out a 45-page catalog in 2 days.
pretty
and sent
good.
it off the printer right before I came here. So that was unheard of. It would take us 3 weeks to do a catalog before because you had to literally had the dark room and we were printing photos.
Yep.
And so I've seen it from the, we had our ledger cards to record all the purchases for clients. So when we literally would get an order, we'd have to write out the invoice or type it. We'd have to write out their ledger card. We'd have to write or type out their envelopes. And then sometimes with international, we had to do 2 envelopes.
You had to take it out of inventory.
And so it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work.
Just to sell something.
So things have, I've been very much involved in streamlining Harlan Burke. And so I think that's always been top of mind. And so I will continue to do that because that's a service-based thing that was instilled by my father.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. The easier it is to do
So
business, the more business
technology
you
is
do.
going to be that's going to be the driving force of the future.
I think it's always been the driving force for me, for the most part.
It's got to be. I mean,
Yeah.
things
I
are.
mean-
We in that same conversation we had in my office the other day about the different things through history. We also had a conversation about how, like, for example, you carry around something in your pocket that's 100 times more powerful than the thing that took the astronauts to the moon.
Correct.
Like in just those few years, that lifetime or less than a lifetime, we've gone from a room full of hardware,
Yeah.
all the way to
To a
this,
supercomputer in your pocket.
to a supercomputer in your pocket in just less than a lifetime. So
Yeah, I think eventually you'll be able to just. It's already very close now. You'll walk up to a dealer's table, scan their ancient coin, and you'll get a whole history of it, as well as what auctions it may have been in, and what certain market prices it.
that's
should
definitely
be.
doable for US
And-
at this
Oh,
point.
for sure for US, but even more for the ancients because
Yeah.
with ancient coins, you can every single ancient coin, not one looks the same as another.
That's true.
And so it's much easier to get the AI recognition for the photo, easier than US coins.
Yes.
Much
Yes.
easier.
Yeah, because we all know how well AI works for recognizing U.S. coins.
Well, Aaron, I really appreciate you hanging out with us. This has been
for having
just
me.
like us hanging out, having a good time, like normal. So, thank you so much. Any projects you're working on right now that you want to plug real quick, or
I've got a numismatic game I'm working on for ancient coins.
what? Is it?
so-
We premiered it on the last episode
Oh,
of the
yeah?
Ancient Coin podcast.
Yeah, sort of.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
kind of.
Like what are we
So-
talking about?
I like
here?
this. This is a really good idea.
Just you don't have to give the whole thing away, but a little teaser here.
Basically, it's like the memory game
Okay.
for ancient coins.
Okay.
With an obverse and reverse, they have to make matches.
Oh.
So that you're not only learning ancient coins, and then there's going to be a.
That's pretty smart.
Basically, you'll roll a dice, and there'll be a series of questions that could be asked about that city or king.
Oh.
And there's a little bit more nuances, and I'm in conversations with Whitman about it.
That's cool.
Right now.
That's super cool. I
And
like
there's-
that.
You can do it not just for ancients, you can do it for U.S. coins, currency, you can do it for
And one of
anything.
the twists that he put on it on the podcast was he took elements out of the photo. And
wait.
we still had to recognize
You
the
took them
coin.
out?
Yeah, he took them out and made them smooth.
No, I just took crappy coins.
Okay.
Oh, that'll work too.
See, I gave you more credit, I guess. Then.
Because,
funny.
it happens all the time where we have a junk bowl or pick bowl
Sure.
at most of the coin shows, and people come up and they say, "What's this?" And we say, "Oh, it's Mauryan Empire, third, second." And what's this? Oh, that's Constantius. How do you know
How
that?
do you know?
Like,
Yeah.
Well, I know it just because, and it can just be, just barely there. And you get
The
enough
bust.
of the
You can just
image.
have the bust, and you be
But
like, I know
it's
who
like
that
looking
guy
at a
is.
picture of your wife. I mean, you know
Yeah.
what it looks like.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Well, fun. That sounds super cool. Oh boy.
I think I just got in trouble, but I'm not sure. So, but thank you, Aaron. Thanks for stopping by, and we really appreciate you coming in.
I'm not
and-
marrying any of my coins.
Oh no.
All right, bud.
I play. No, thanks a lot for having me, guys.
Yeah,
This is
buddy.
really great. You guys
Anytime.
are doing a wonderful job here.
We
at
have.
Women's Show.
We love doing it. It's
Yeah,
so much
we
fun.
really
It's
do.
awesome. It's awesome.
Thanks.